Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. Now, we're just hours away from when Singapore Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong delivers the 2025 budget statement.
Going by the theme, Onward Together for a Better Tomorrow, PM Wong said in a social media post that this year's budget will involve everyone and advances the Forward Singapore plans for a stronger and more united society.
Indeed, some key themes expected include cost of living, job security and skills, and SG60. But with Budget 2025 being the fifth and final one for the current government term and an impending election that has to be held by the 23rd of November this year, what holds? Well, for more insights, we're joined by Yuit, President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Yuit, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right. Nice to have you on. It's a great day to have you on to talk about Budget 2025. We know that the four broad themes that will be covered for this year's budget are as follows. Economic strategies for the next bound. We have opportunities for skills upgrading and jobs for workers. Number 3, support for Singaporeans across different life stages. And finally, strengthening Singaporeans' sense of solidarity and unity as the country marks SG60. How could you summarize some of the key initiatives you hope to see across the board this year?
I think if you look at all the four pillars, all of them have some things to do with the small and medium enterprises. And of course, we look at the broader base, which is the small and micro. I think for many companies, one area is improving their capabilities. Now, if you look at capability improvement, I think you can separate one portion, which is cost defrayment, because certain policies and certain support brings the cost down. And then there are others that actively moves capability upwards. So I think broadly, from the digitalization perspective, and then you have AI and so on, I think capability uplift is really something a lot of companies have been looking at support and strengthening on that area. The other area is training. Now, if you look at the last few years, there's been a lot of support in training for the individual worker uplift. Now, how do we align that to the enterprise value? How does it improve enterprise performance? And that's the area that we hope that the budget can address so that the training is more aligned towards enterprise outcomes. Because ultimately, when we are going for training, a large portion is really around, does it make our economy more competitive? Right, other than the self-expression part of training. And the other part we are also looking at for the third thing is that overall, as the help comes in, can we also look at simplifying some of the processes and the access to the support so that support can be obtained fast, easy, and hassle-free? And then that would overall make things a little more efficient for SMEs and businesses getting support and interacting with the agencies.
All right, so let's hone in on this job support. Over the years, we've seen different policies, right, such as the Workfare Scheme and the Job Support Scheme, initiatives that balance economic restructuring and competitiveness being introduced at the budget platform. So what are some of the key concerns that you have heard from SME leaders at this point in time?
I think it's a very good question because fundamentally, if you look at the policies that the government have been putting in uplifting the worker, I think all of them have really been significant in helping address talent gap and skill set gap that opens up as the economy moves forward or technology moves forward. And that's really important. And we've seen a lot of these support and help really come in and help cushion the impact of transformation and technology transformation. Now, one thing that businesses have been concerned about as that comes in is that does it then, over time, if we are not careful, result in a workforce that becomes less competitive because they become reliant on some of the support? And the question then is, how do we ensure that the support continues to refine towards delivering the enterprise competitiveness and our industry competitiveness? And I think it's really important because on and on, as a program moves forward, as we talk about improving skills, we talk about certification, there is a natural pull for a community sometimes to become you kind of forget that what are we really trying to do? So once in a while, I think it's really important to ask ourselves, what are we doing it for? And if we direct it back to really delivering that kind of enterprise value and industry competitiveness and economic competitiveness, I think we can't go very far off and very wrong with that.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? Improving long-term competitiveness for companies, I think, is the direction the government will look at targeting. They've also introduced a slew of initiatives aimed at helping workers upskill over the years, but obviously given the terse global economic climate right now, geopolitical uncertainty, especially as we hear about potential tariffs on the horizon from the US for various countries, President Trump, of course, has already introduced a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium imports. How important is it at this point for measures that can encourage firms to remain agile and talent ready, to your point, to meet industry needs?
I think that, this is a very complicated or rather multifaceted challenge, right? When you have tariffs and you have a trade disruption, what you are getting is a different way in which businesses are operating, not just for locals, but for our competitors or our partners all around the region and around the globe. And in many ways, your firm gets impacted in ways that you never foresee. And if you look at, for example, a lot of Chinese companies coming out of China and coming into ASEAN, and we think that, immediately there are going to be benefits for ASEAN because we take in the investment. At the same time, it increases the level of competition here. So I think it's really important that we as businesses look at the challenge as an evolving landscape, and we don't get fixated on the problem being only a one facet, or that we really understand the creature, because it keeps evolving, right? So in this perspective, I think firms, to tackle the challenge, need to do a few things. First is that they got to remain open to the fact that their market size and market development needs to constantly be at work, which means that if you have a local market right now, and that's your primary market, you may need to look at opening other channels of market, either through online means, or you may want to look at market penetration into the region, because then that defrays your risk in terms of relying on a single market like just Singapore.
Sure.
And at the same time, having talent, we increasingly are also very cost heavy in human resource and human capital. And many firms are increasingly looking at how to balance offshore resources with onshore. A lot of companies have realized that, hey, I could remotely hire people and handle remote interactions through the period in COVID. And many companies, if you start to look at balancing your cost of hire across the region, that makes you a lot better place to manage costs as well. So I think these are just two examples in which you got to be very agile and absorb talent from the region. And I think Singapore is still the prime place to get real good talent, people who knows us, people who can align with us, because we are all brought up, educated in a similar education background. I think then look at how we can focus the core hire and the core team in Singapore to deliver even higher level of work. And if you engineer your business in a certain way, and sometimes it requires you to restructure your business altogether. But there are times that you may need to look at that and then rebuild it, because right now, with the way the trade situation is going, many things will be dramatically changed, not just temporarily, but permanently.
Yeah. Speaking of dramatic change, still on the business front, let's look at going green. So we hear that some business groups are asking for more help on this, because adopting sustainable technologies and practices can certainly cost a good amount. So from green finance initiatives to carbon tax revenue, what are some of the gaps on that front that you think the government might be looking to tackle through this budget?
I think that for the area of green, there are two broad areas that we need to clearly differentiate. I think there are many businesses in which the green initiatives do not impact them in the immediate situation. And for many of them, I think the important part is to set their mind to be ready to adopt or start investigating how it can be done. And that's very clear for them. Now then the other group that actually has immediate needs to go sustainable and immediate need to handle either Scope 1 or Scope 2 impact for them. And in these cases, I think many of them are looking at more direct help. And, for example, when it comes to green financing, many have shared that the support on the financing part could be implemented better vis-a-vis the audit requirements to justify why you're applying for the loan, for example. And in this case, if the cost doesn't add up, then fundamentally the help isn't quite there, despite the program or the package being available. So these are the things that I think we can do better and be more refined and really go down to the nuts and bolts of what really the companies require on maybe a grouping level, whether you're Scope 1 or you're Scope 2, or, right now it doesn't impact you and you need to get ready and be prepared.
All right. Now, recent budgets have also emphasized cost of living relief measures, and this area seems to be taking on more importance as the years go on, especially as we continue to grapple with inflation. That being said, Yuit, we did see a GST tax hike just last year. So against that backdrop, to what extent do you think the GST hike has been felt amid the current inflation we're seeing? And secondly, in what ways can the government help with respect to cushioning the effects of higher costs in general?
I think that there's one part that we do know, that we import a lot of the goods from overseas, right, or 100%, or at least 99 point something, right? So a lot of times the cost of goods are dictated by our competitors and our exchange rate, and that's clear. But the other part is, when we have GST hikes in last year, where many businesses then had to implement either an inline increase or sometimes because of the fact that they have been holding back on costs, and then when GST hike comes, all the cost comes together. So you as a consumer then feel not just a 1% hike, you feel a 10, 15, or even 20% hike. If you buy coffee, that it went from 130 to maybe 150 now, 160. Yep. In most places, at least 150 at the minimum. And some coffee shops are going at 2 or 210. So that's really impactful because, if we look at it from the business perspective, even though many of us is a pass-through cost, but it impacts our manpower and human capital aspect of our costs. So staff come to us and say, hey, it is actually a lot more costly to live and it's a lot more costly to sustain, so salaries need to come up. So then that creates one cycle, and that cycle kind of has ripple effects through the economy, and it takes a while for it to stabilize and land on a point where you are comfortable working out the cost and revenue proportions.
Okay, a quick follow-up to that question. I suppose some analysts see tax hikes or cuts as unlikely, since most tax categories saw changes in the last few budgets. But given that Singapore's economy performed better than expected last year, corporate and personal income tax rebates potentially are a possibility. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we saw the same happen last year when we had some tax rebates, both on the corporate side primarily, right? And I think that for businesses, that's something that will be welcome as a cost measurement and cost defrayment. And I think that there is a pretty good chance, like maybe at least 50% or 51% that would happen this year.
All right. So with regards to a sandwich generation, which has come up in many conversations now, including the Forward Singapore exercise, especially those who are raising young children and caring for their elderly parents at the same time, what are some of the areas you hope can be covered for this key demographic then? Yeah,
very good question. And, I just had my kid around Valentine's Day.
Yes, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And, raising kids, I know that it is challenging. And for many of us who are looking at having children and are already in the process of having children, I think the cost aspect, and it's not just broad-based. You would hear that cost is a very big concern for anyone considering having kids or stopping at one. And then you have the other side where you are looking after your parents. And all of it comes down to how can we maybe break down the cost pressure on the sandwich generation, and how can we actually take that away so that there is a relief on pressure on this generation, and at the same time, they can go on and then prepare and take the action for the generation to come. For example, have more kids, right? And I think that's really quite a critical situation at this point. Our birth rates aren't improving despite our measures so far, right?
All right, Yuit, this is the final question, and it's an overarching one. We obviously can't escape the fact that we've got a GE coming up this year. Beyond payouts, what exactly does a 2025 election budget look like to you? What kind of role will such a budget play in setting the direction when it comes to fulfilling the key aspirations of both people and businesses?
I think it's really important that we don't just look at the immediate short-term gains. Many of them will look at, what can I get immediately? And I think that will be part of the budget. I think importantly, the budget needs to prepare for us at least for the next 5 to 10 years. And that includes infrastructural foundations, investing in our core capability to allow us to leverage and then effectively compete in the region. And I think a large part also is increasingly, many of us are looking at having Singapore as the capital of at least region, and how do we have a support to make that happen, both in the mindset and educating our people, so that we can broaden the scope and the dynamics of the market that we see ourselves in.
All right, as we gear up for Budget 2025, it's clear that businesses, individuals, and families alike are waiting for measures that can offer support, innovation, and resilience for the future. Yuit, thanks so much for your time and insights today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for coming on. That was Yuit, President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, and you are listening to Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.